Marcus Williams had learned not to unpack completely. At 17, he'd lived in 14 different foster homes, 3 group homes, and spent 6 months in a juvenile facility when one placement went terribly wrong. Each time he arrived somewhere new, well-meaning adults would tell him to make himself at home. But Marcus had learned that home was a temporary concept, something that could be revoked without warning, dissolved by paperwork, or simply terminated when things got complicated. The longest he'd stayed anywhere was 18 months with the Rodriguez family. When he was 13, Mrs. Rodriguez had made him feel like he might actually belong somewhere. But then Mr. Rodriguez lost his job, finances got tight, and Marcus became an expense they couldn't afford. He understood. He'd always understood. But understanding didn't make the leaving hurt any less. Now, 6 months into his placement with the Johnson family in Atlanta, Marcus was trying something different. Instead of protecting himself by remaining detached, he was cautiously allowing himself to hope. Carol and Robert Johnson were different from the others. They were older, in their 50s, with grown children who'd moved out. They'd specifically requested to foster a teenager, which was unusual. Most families wanted younger children. "We know what we're getting into," Carol had told the social worker during Marcus's placement meeting. "Teenagers come with history, with walls, with reasons to not trust. We're not trying to erase his past. We're trying to give him a future." The Family Feud opportunity had come through Robert's job at a local community center. The show was looking for families with inspiring stories, and someone had nominated the Johnsons, highlighting their commitment to fostering teens who had aged out of traditional adoptive placements. Marcus had been hesitant at first. Television meant exposure, questions, the risk of people looking at him with pity. But Carol had asked him directly, "What do you want, Marcus? Not what you think we want to hear, not what's easiest. What do you actually want?" It was such a simple question, but Marcus couldn't remember the last time an adult had asked him that. Most decisions about his life had been made by caseworkers, judges, and foster parents who meant well but rarely considered his preferences. "I want to try," he'd said finally. "I want to do something normal with my family." The word family had slipped out before he could stop it, and he'd immediately tensed, waiting for the awkwardness that usually followed when he claimed belonging. He wasn't sure he'd earned, but Carol had simply smiled and said, "Then we'll do it as a family." The Johnson family team consisted of Marcus, Carol, Robert, and their adult children who had flown in for the taping. Jennifer, 28, a teacher from Nashville, and Michael, 25, a nurse from Birmingham. Both had welcomed Marcus with an ease that still surprised him. They didn't treat him like a charity case or a foster kid who might not be around long. They treated him like their brother. In the weeks leading up to the show, the family had practiced together, but more than that, they'd talked, really talked. Carol had asked Marcus about his life before them, not from curiosity, but from genuine care about understanding him. Robert had shared stories about his own difficult childhood, creating bridges of connection that Marcus hadn't expected. "You know," Robert had said one evening while they prepped for potential questions, "every family is made up of people who chose each other. Some of us just take longer to find our people." The comment had stayed with Marcus, rolling around in his mind like a marble in a jar. The idea that family could be a choice rather than an accident of birth was revolutionary to someone who'd spent 17 years believing he was unwanted. The day of the taping, Marcus wore the blue button-down shirt that Carol had bought him for the occasion. It was the first time in his life that someone had bought him clothes that weren't from a thrift store or discount rack. When he'd protested that it was too expensive, Carol had said simply, "This is what parents do. We want you to feel confident." Steve Harvey noticed Marcus immediately during the pre-show warm-up. There was something in the young man's posture, the way he stood slightly apart, even while clearly belonging to the group. The careful way he monitored everyone's reactions, the hyper-vigilance that came from years of uncertainty. Steve had seen it before in kids who'd learned that safety was never guaranteed. "Marcus," Steve said during introductions, "tell me about your family." Marcus looked at the Johnsons, then back at Steve. "This is the Johnson family," he said carefully. I live with them." Carol stepped forward gently. "Marcus is our son," she said firmly, with a conviction that made Marcus's eyes well up. "We've been a family for 6 months now. Steve caught the emotion in Marcus's reaction and the protective way Carol had claimed him. His instincts told him there was more to this story. 6 months, Steve repeated. That's not very long to become family. Sometimes, Robert said, you know right away when someone belongs. The game began against the Peterson family from Dallas, and both teams proved competitive. Marcus was quieter than the others, more observant, but when he did speak up with suggestions, his answers were thoughtful and often correct. He had a way of reading people that came from years of having to quickly assess new environments and figure out how to survive in them. Steve found himself checking on Marcus throughout the game, making sure he felt included. There was something about the young man's careful gratitude, the way he seemed surprised by every small kindness that tugged at Steve's heart. It was during the 4th round that the question came that would change everything. We surveyed 100 people, Steve announced. Name something you want most in life. Marcus was at the podium. The question was broad enough to have dozens of correct answers. But for Marcus, there was only one truth that mattered. He looked back at the Johnson family, then at the audience, then directly at Steve. A family that keeps me, he said quietly. The words hung in the air like a prayer. The studio fell completely silent. Steve's expression shifted from entertainer to something much more human and vulnerable. A family that keeps you, Steve repeated softly. Tell me about that, son. Marcus swallowed hard, realizing he'd just revealed his deepest vulnerability on national television. But something about Steve's gentle tone, about the way the Johnson family was looking at him with love rather than pity, made him want to continue. I've been in foster care since I was 3, Marcus said, his voice gaining strength. I've lived in a lot of places, with a lot of different families. Some were good, some were not so good. But none of them kept me. There was always a reason. Money, or space, or I got too old, or I had too many problems. The audience was completely silent. Now, hanging on every word. I used to think it was because I was broken somehow, Marcus continued. Like there was something wrong with me that made me impossible to love permanently. But the Johnsons, his voice cracked with emotion. They make me feel like maybe I was just waiting for the right family to find me. Behind Marcus, Carol was openly crying. Robert had his arm around her, his own eyes filled with tears. Jennifer and Michael were looking at their foster brother with obvious love and pride. Steve Harvey, who had heard thousands of stories over his years of hosting, found himself completely moved. He set down his cards and approached Marcus directly. Marcus, he said, I need you to listen to me very carefully. You weren't kept by those other families, not because you were broken, but because you weren't meant for them. You were meant for this family. Marcus nodded, tears now flowing freely. But more than that, Steve continued, I need you to understand something. Family isn't just about being kept, it's about being chosen. And son, you weren't just kept by these people, you were chosen. That's when Carol could no longer stay silent. She moved from the family section to where Marcus stood at the podium. Marcus, she said, her voice shaking with emotion, I need to tell you something, and I need everyone here to witness it. Marcus turned to look at her, confusion and hope warring in his expression. Robert and I didn't foster you because we felt sorry for you, Carol said clearly. We didn't take you in because it was the right thing to do, or because we wanted to help a kid in need. We chose you because the moment we met you, we knew you belonged with us. We knew you were our son. The studio erupted in gasps and sobs from the audience. You're not our foster son, Carol continued, reaching into her purse and pulling out an envelope. You're our son, period. And we want everyone to know that we've started the adoption process. If you'll have us, we want to make this permanent. We want to make this real. We want to keep you forever. Marcus stared at the envelope in Carol's hands, legal documents that represented everything he'd dreamed of for 14 years, a permanent family, a last name that would actually be his, parents who wanted him not temporarily, but forever. You want to adopt me? He whispered. We want to adopt you, Robert said, joining them on stage. We want you to be a Johnson officially, legally, permanently. Steve Harvey, who had hosted Family Feud for years, and thought he'd seen every possible emotional moment, found himself completely overwhelmed. This wasn't just a game show anymore. This was a life-changing moment, happening in real time. "Marcus," Steve said, "what do you say to that?" Marcus looked at Carol, at Robert, at Jennifer and Michael, who were beaming at him from the family section. For the first time in his 17 years, he was being offered exactly what he'd always wanted, a family that would choose him permanently. "Yes," he said, his voice strong and clear, despite his tears. "Yes, I want to be your son. I want to be a Johnson." The celebration that followed was unlike anything the Family Feud studio had ever seen. The Johnson family surrounded Marcus in a group hug that lasted several minutes. The audience was on their feet, many crying openly. Even the competing Peterson family had abandoned their podium to congratulate the Johnsons. But Steve wasn't finished. He signaled for quiet and approached the family group. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "what we just witnessed wasn't just television. This was a young man finding his forever family, and a family claiming their son. This is what love looks like." He turned to Marcus directly. "Son, I need you to understand something. You spent 14 years thinking you were unwanted, but what really happened is that God was preparing you for this family and preparing this family for you. You weren't rejected by those other homes. You were protected for this one." Steve reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his business card. "Marcus, I want you to have this. Not because you're a contestant, but because you're a young man who just taught everyone in the studio about faith, about hope, about never giving up on your dreams. If you ever need anything, advice, support, just someone to remind you how special you are, you call me." Then Steve did something unprecedented. He removed his suit jacket and draped it over Marcus's shoulders. "This jacket has been with me through thousands of shows," he said. "But today, it belongs to you. You wear this, and remember that you're not just a Johnson now. You're a son. You're home." The image captured in that moment, Marcus wearing Steve's oversized jacket, surrounded by his new forever family, his face showing a joy that seemed almost too big for one person to contain, became one of the most shared photos in television history. The episode aired 6 weeks later and immediately went viral. The hashtag #MarcusFindsHome trended worldwide, with people sharing their own stories of adoption, foster care, and finding family in unexpected places. Adoption agencies reported increases in inquiries about fostering teenagers, directly attributable to Marcus's story. But the real impact was more personal. Marcus legally became Marcus Johnson 3 months after the taping, in a courthouse ceremony attended by his entire new extended family. Steve Harvey flew in to be there, sitting in the front row as the adoption was finalized. "How does it feel to officially be a Johnson?" the judge asked Marcus after signing the papers. "It feels like coming home," Marcus answered simply. The transition wasn't always easy. 17 years of instability don't disappear overnight, and Marcus sometimes struggled with the permanence of his new situation. There were moments when he'd pack his belongings, expecting to be moved. There were nights when he'd wake up in a panic, thinking he'd dreamed the whole thing. But the Johnsons were patient, understanding, and consistent. They got Marcus into therapy to help him process his trauma. They included him in every family decision, every holiday tradition, every future plan. They showed him, day by day, that love could be permanent. Marcus graduated from high school as Marcus Johnson, with Carol and Robert beaming in the audience. He'd been accepted to Georgia State University with a partial scholarship, planning to study social work with a focus on helping other kids in foster care. At his graduation party, surrounded by his new extended family and friends who'd become like family, Marcus stood up to make a toast. 2 years ago, he said, "I thought family was something that happened to other people. I thought I was broken, that there was something about me that made me impossible to love permanently." He looked around the room at all the faces that had become precious to him. "But I learned something on Family Feud that changed my life. I learned that some families are born and others are chosen. I learned that love isn't about biology. It's about commitment. It's about people who see you, really see you, and decide they want you in their lives forever." His voice grew stronger as he continued. "The Johnsons didn't just give me a home. They gave me a future. They gave me the chance to become the person I was meant to be. And now I want to spend my life giving that same gift to other kids who are still waiting for their forever family. The applause that followed was heartfelt, but it was Carol's quiet, "We're so proud of you, son," that meant the most to Marcus. Today, Marcus Johnson is a sophomore at Georgia State, working part-time at the same community center where Robert works. He mentors other teens in foster care, helping them navigate the system and holding on to hope for their own forever families. He still has Steve Harvey's business card in his wallet, and he's used it twice. Once when he was struggling with anxiety about college, and once just to say thank you on the anniversary of the show. Both times, Steve answered personally, reminding Marcus of his worth and his bright future. The jacket hangs in Marcus's dorm room, but he wore it to his high school graduation, his college orientation, and every major milestone since. It's become a symbol, not just of his appearance on Family Feud, but of the moment when he stopped being a foster kid and became a son. Carol and Robert Johnson have since fostered 2 more teenagers, both of whom they've adopted. They say Marcus taught them that family isn't about blood, it's about choice, commitment, and love that persists through challenges. Marcus was never our foster son. Carol often tells people who ask about their story. From the day he walked into our house, he was our son. The legal papers just made it official. And Marcus, who spent the first 17 years of his life believing he was unwanted, now knows the truth. He wasn't unwanted. He was just waiting for the right family to find him. A family that would choose him not temporarily, but forever. A family that would keep him. Because sometimes, the thing you want most in life, a family that keeps you, is exactly what's been waiting for you all along.